Get everything that you need to get out right now. All right? Every laugh. Okay. Literal, Michael took that. I mean, Mario took that literal.
No, you tell Mario to laugh. He just starts.
I was like, every laugh, he said.
All
All right. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Strike from Above podcast. I am your host, Arvin Reyes. This is the podcast where we talk about life. Life could be confusing. Life could be hard. Life could be draining. Life could be exhausting. It could be weird. Sometimes it could be weird, right? I have a couple of guests today. I'm still trying to determine if they're going to be part of this podcast. Everybody that I have is like under like probation or trial, or you know what I mean.
Yeah.
These two guys are students of mine. I'm no longer your youth pastors, but I will always be your mentor because mentorship never ends. You want to introduce yourself? Let's start with Chris.
Hi, my name is Chris. I'm 17.
Why are you looking at me, man? That was fine. That's it. You don't have to say no more.
My name is Mario.
Oh, okay. All right. How old are you, Mario?
I'm 15.
You're 15?
No,
Wait, you are not 15. Are you 15?
Yeah.
15.
Oh, dang. He's 2 years younger than you?
Yeah, I know, right? I forget he's 2 years younger than me.
Yeah, most people just like are surprised on my age.
15.
Yeah,
I don't think
15?
I want you in my podcast anymore.
You're too young.
Sit on the other side of the room. No, I'm kidding. What are we here to do, guys?
Talk about life.
Talk about life. Talk about life. The last episode that we had with Beachy, we said that we were going to start reading my book. It's a read along. We're going to do a read along today. I don't know how you guys are going to read along if you're driving or if you're at the gym or if you're like doing anything, but just listen.
Just listen.
All right, just listen. Like I said, when I read this book, it's an audio book, right? When I said, when I wrote this book, it wasn't the intention wasn't for it to be like a bestseller. The intention wasn't for me to make like a lot of money off of it. The intention really is to get that message out there. I've had a rough childhood. I've had a rough life. Would I change anything? Absolutely not. Because if I were to change anything, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. And I'm proud of the person that I am today. So what I want to do with these read-alongs is I want to read a chapter and I want to discuss it afterwards. If you guys have any questions, Johnny, if you want to hop in, Johnny's in the background today. Johnny took like a vacation from us for a little bit, but he's here. Say hi, Johnny.
What's good? Yeah, what's good?
If you have anything to ask me after whoever, which one of you guys going to read?
I'll read it.
All right. After Chris reads the first chapter, let's go from there. And yeah, let's get to it. Chapter 1.
Arvin Reyes, straight from above. Dedicated to his wonderful mother, amazing wife, and his beautiful daughter. You want an introduction or just a chapter 1?
Nah, I'd say just go to
Mario
chapter
read the
1.
introduction thinking it's chapter 1.
It's like I read chapter 1, I closed the book and then opened it back up. Like I just completely missed the introduction part.
I think in most books that's what happens. So I didn't put too much on the introduction. I was just like, I don't think anybody's gonna read the introduction.
Right.
At least I never do when I read a book.
You don't read the introduction?
I don't read the introduction. I just go straight to chapter 1. I'm like, what is all this, man? Some introductions are like 4 pages long.
It's a good introduction, though. I mean, the one in your book.
It gets straight to the point.
Read it to find out.
There you go. Read it to find out. It's now available on Amazon.
All right. Chapter 1. Growing up. Do I read the verse? You want me to read the verse?
Sure.
All right, the verse.
Each chapter has a verse. Has a biblical verse. Ephesians.
Ephesians 5.
Ephesians
Live a life of love, just as Christ loved and gave himself up for us, as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. Chapter 1. Growing Up. No one knows their true purpose in life, which can be particularly difficult when growing up. As a child, you spend time playing outside with your friends. Sometimes you get creative by using your imagination or being competitive and start challenging each other. Who can ride their bike faster down the hill? Who's the best skateboarder? Who can rollerblade like a pro? I don't think anyone rollerblades anymore though. Through these competitive games, inevitably you'll get hurt. You might fall and scrape your knee or graze your elbow. You cry and cry until you can't shed any more tears. And then what do? That's right. You get up and do it all over again until you get right or beat your friends. While some of us do learn the first time we fall down, for others it can take time. Little do we know that as a child, those challenges and those falls are actually great life lessons. As you grow, things can quickly become a lot more emotional. My life as a kid was quite different from most childhoods. Unfortunately, I had to grow up fast. By the time I was 7 years old, I had to babysit my little sister. I was left all by myself in our new home in Maryland. While my mom and dad had to go to work, my parents had gotten themselves into debt and had to make monthly mortgage payments, which they never seemed to afford. This meant working extra hard and sacrificing their time with us kids. As a result, I, a child, was left to take care of another child. And back then, I didn't realize how my life and family dynamic would change considerably once we moved from the cramped apartment in Washington, D.C. to the house. Sure, we had more space to grow, but this also meant my parents rarely spent time with us. My dad would work Saturdays and even Sundays, while my mom would work late most weekdays and sometimes Saturdays as well. When I eventually started making friends in my new school, I thought it was pretty cool that almost everyone lived in the same neighborhood. I felt as though my life was starting to become a bit like a Disney movie. You know, the happy family full of love and joy.
A Disney movie. Is that what you said? A
Yeah,
Disney movie?
Disney
Okay.
movie.
I thought I heard this movie. I'm sorry. My
Yeah, it's Disney
apologies.
movie. Generally, there's a big brother, a little sister, and a loving mom and dad. They spend their weekends at local parks, teaching their kids how to ride a bike or having picnics with the neighbors. You get the idea. I had a vivid imagination, but that was it. That childhood was conjured up from my imagination. My life was nothing like that at all. My life was full of lies. And this imaginary family that I would describe at school was fake. The reality was I was so focused on hyping up my family at school that my grades suffered. I neglected my schoolwork and dedicated my time to convince others that I had a normal childhood. It's funny to think of an elementary school student having such a double life. I was a prime example of many children who portray a fake home life. See, my life was a living nightmare when both parents were home. I witnessed things no child should ever see, and I would dread going home. For me, my home wasn't a sanctuary where I could relax and unwind. It was a battlefield in every sense of word. I was on edge, anxious, and afraid all the time, when I should have felt safe, secure, and protected. And it all began when we lived in a tiny apartment in Washington, D.C. My memories are so vivid that they continue to impact my life today. Some experiences I'll never be able to recover from, and others I'm still trying to heal from. One Saturday afternoon, when I was around 4 or 5 years old, I was sitting on my dad's lap. My mother was fussing about something. I wasn't paying attention because wrestling was on the TV, and I just wanted my mom to be quiet so I could hear. Hulk Hogan and the Macho Man were talking. Then I heard my dad shout and say, "I told you to drop it. Are you telling me you're not going to listen?" He suddenly threw me off his lap, got up and pushed her against the wall, and hit her across the face multiple times with no remorse. That day marked the first time I saw my father as a threat, as someone to fear. The following Monday morning, my mom dropped me off school gate much earlier than usual, as she didn't want anyone to see her face. My kindergarten teacher, Miss Barbosa, noticed and tried to comfort her. While at school, what I witnessed that weekend kept playing over and over again in my head. When Miss Barbosa asked me something, I couldn't focus on her words. I couldn't think straight, and there was no way I could focus on the lesson. It was only when she gently touched my shoulder and said, "Arvin, are you okay?" I asked if you did anything fun this weekend. I looked up at her and said, "I saw my dad hit my mom really hard while they were fighting." She looked at me and sighed, then said, "Well, that's not something you should say here in school, so let's not talk about this anymore." So that's exactly what I did. I never spoke a word to anyone at school for years about what was going on at home. As I grew up, I never really understood why she said that to me. Maybe she was going through the same thing at home. Maybe she didn't have any problems. Or maybe she just didn't care. Only God knows why. As the weeks went by, I would see violence regularly. Every time they asked me at our morning circle what we had done over the weekend, I would say pass. Until one weekend, my mother took me to my grandparents' house. That weekend was different. My grandfather asked me if I wanted to go to the zoo. So of course I jumped in sheer excitement and said yes. That day was amazing. It was full of joy and excitement. It was a taste of what childhood should be like. A moment that stood out for me that day was the gorilla exhibit. I couldn't take my eyes off that silverback, the biggest one at the zoo, and my grandfather compared me to him. He'd say that it looked like my twin, and how dare they lock up my twin in the zoo. It's funny how much this memory still brings a smile to my face. Little did he know that now as an adult, my nickname is Superman the Silverback. Now in school, I would no longer have to say pass when it came to sharing what we did over the weekend. Now I had a genuine story to share during circle time. I was excited to share my weekend experience with the class. Shoo, my grandpa took me to the zoo to see the silverback gorilla, and he said he's my twin. My twin and I were talking to each other, and I told him that one day I'm going to get him out. Then we went to the top of La Aguja, the Washington Monument. He said, "Okay, Arvin, let someone else go." My teacher said with a smile. The child in me was glowing, and I was finally behaving as a 5-year-old should. My weekend adventures with my grandpa lasted about 18 months before we moved from Washington, D.C. to Maryland. Once my father started to notice how close I was getting to my grandfather, the visits dwindled significantly, and I never really understood why. My dad never came with me, and I never asked why, but deep inside, I felt as though my father didn't like to see me happy, and so I was okay with him not coming. As a child, I never really paid much attention to the fact that I was comfortable with my father around. He always seemed to ruin my fun, and whenever I showed an ounce of happiness, he'd shut it down immediately. He would say, "Your grandpa's un viejo maricón, and he has turned you into one too." I was only a kid, so I had no idea what he meant. But now I know he was trying to say that showing any sort of emotion was an act of homosexuality, of being gay. Eventually, I stopped showing any emotion when I was around him. I kept quiet. When he came home from work, I would try to make him happy by doing things he liked, such as taking off his socks and turning on the TV for him, making sure the volume was high enough. My mom would do the same by making sure his dinner was ready on the table. I would try with all my might to be invisible to him, just to keep the peace. Growing up in that house wasn't easy, but that's just how life was back then, and I didn't dare to question it. I was raised to keep quiet, follow orders, and never question my parents' authority, especially if it was coming from my father. Looking back at my childhood, I know this was a horrible upbringing, but I always had the phrase "obey before you understand" in my mind, and it's something I still live by today. I even use it when I preach. I don't think my dad realized it at the time, but his actions led to me developing a strong character. Over the years, the domestic violence at home got worse, and I didn't understand why. I didn't understand why my mom kept pushing his buttons. It wasn't until later when I found out he was being unfaithful that I understood why. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. My dad had started a whole new family somewhere else, with someone else, neglecting us both completely. When my little sister was born, I was thrilled to have a sibling. Then on a random Saturday, my dad took me to a house that I've never been before. When we went inside, a chubby little boy was playing in the living room. My dad pointed at him and, with a smile, said, "Look, that's your brother." As a 7-year-old boy, I was so confused and had so many questions. How did my mom give birth to a boy when my little sister was just born? Was she pregnant before and I didn't know about it? Why didn't I meet him before? "Okay, that's my brother?" I said, confused, while everyone in the room laughed, knowing what my father had done. They knew that my father had tainted his marriage. They knew that my family was on the verge of being destroyed. They knew quite well that innocent children were caught in the middle and that my father only cared about his physical pleasure. As they laughed, I was filled with excitement, but confusion. But immediately I was told, "Don't tell your mom that you know you have a brother." I couldn't imagine why she wouldn't want me to know I had one. Again, I didn't question it. We went back home and I kept my lips sealed until the following Monday. I woke up and started to get ready for school. Excited, I was going to tell my friends about my new brother. My mom noticed that I was acting strange and she asked me what was going on. "Nothing," I said. I waited, but I just couldn't keep it to myself. "Can I tell my friends about my brother?" I said as she looked at me like I was crazy. "What are you talking about?" she said. "Mom, it's okay. I know about my little brother." In that single moment, I had spilled the beans. She stood there in silence, and I could see the anger growing across her face. I said, "Were you trying to surprise me?" Papi me llevó al verlo. I tried to explain what had happened that weekend. When is my brother coming home? I asked. Smack! She hit me so hard across the face and told me to go to school. I stood there not understanding what I had done wrong. Okay, I said, crying as I made my way out the door. I don't know why I always mumbled okay when my parents hit me. I guess I wasn't supposed to know just yet, and my dad ruined the surprise by taking me to see him. I kept talking to myself all the way to school, trying to piece together the jigsaw puzzle in my mind. Why did my mom get so upset with me? I'm happy that I have a brother, but why did they keep it a secret from me? Why was he living in another house? When I got home from school, I waited for my mom to come back from work to ask her to not tell dad that I ruined the surprise. Mom, my dad told me not to tell you about my little brother. He said you get mad, so please don't tell him I told you, okay? There was no response. In a Hispanic household, when your parents don't answer you, that means you're in a lot of trouble. When my dad got home, it was only a couple minutes before the whole house erupted in chaos. Yelling, banging, and screaming took place simultaneously. Once this happened, I knew I had to find somewhere to hide, and fast. All of this because I opened my big fat mouth. Then the tears started rolling down my face as I knew what he was doing to my mom. I knew exactly what was happening behind my bedroom door, and it was all my fault. This was my life as a child, full of secrets, full of surprises, and dark and dangerous times. My home was never my happy place. It was a battlefield filled with so many mixed emotions that never helped me to understand life. I didn't understand what love was, what it meant, or what it was supposed to look like. But after all, that's why we're created by the Lord, to love one another and spread the word of God. End of chapter 1.
End of chapter 1. Next time, I need you to put a little bit more emotion when you read my book, son.
What's up?
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I think I did pretty well.
You did. You did a good job. Thank you. Um, so I had actually forgotten what chapter 1 was. Um, so a little story about writing this book, right? This book, um, everything that's in this book, I had believed that I had already like gotten over.
Right.
Right. I had believed that I had I still had that mentality of forgive and forget. Right. And forgive and forget is a big lie that has been told to us for many years, many generations. You can't ever forgive and forget. You can forgive and move on. That is what you can do when you establish a good relationship with God. You learn how to forgive and move on. However, forgive and forget is something that is impossible to do. It's not our job to forget. We will never forget, especially when it comes to trauma. I thought I had accomplished that. I thought that I had forgotten. But what I really had done was tucked it in a little corner in the back of my mind and just never revisit it. So when it came to writing this book, I revisited, I had a chance to revisit my childhood trauma. And my childhood trauma was so deep that as I was writing each chapter, this book took me 4 years to write. 4 years, yeah. It because each chapter that I would write would hit me so hard in a form of like I was healing. You know, I was healing and I was remembering everything that God had allowed to happen. And I was also remembering, obviously, I didn't know as a kid, but now as an adult, I was remembering every moment how God was there in every single moment. So, yeah, that's something I wanted to share. That this book was very difficult for me to write.
Something I like about the book though is as you progress the book, you can see it's like different stages of your life, right?
Mhm.
So you can also see your relationship with God, how you distance and went back at the same time. It's like you,
Oh yeah,
as the book progressed, your character obviously
yeah,
you saw the character growth with you'd be closer to God, and then something would happen. You were angry at one point, and everything just it all what's it called? It just kind of,
It's like a roller coaster.
yeah, it unfolded
Yeah.
beautifully. Like it was very well
Yeah,
done.
and you know what? Like that's so let me say this. In it when I talk to people about having a relationship with Jesus, like that's something that they tell me all the time. Every time I feel like I get closer to God, I feel like something happens that causes places a distance from places a distance from God. Like something happens that I don't want anything to do with God, and I distance myself from God because I think about why this has happened. Like it's not fair. I'm doing everything right. I'm trying to get closer to Him. Um, that that's what this life is. When you try and get closer to God, the enemy is always going to try. The enemy's never going to say, "Oh, look at him getting closer to God. Look, good for him." Go ahead and do your thing. Do your thing, kid. Like that's never what the devil is going to think. That's never what the enemy is going to think. There's two kingdoms at work. There's the kingdom of light and there's the kingdom of darkness. And the kingdom of darkness is working just as hard as the kingdom of light is. And what happens is when you're trying to get close to the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of darkness is going to hit you with everything they got so you can place that distance, because the closer that you get to God, the more you're able to understand what is distracting you and what is not distracting you. So they want you. So the kingdom of darkness is always, like, the enemy is always going to try to distract you, like right before you get there.
Right.
You start doing everything right. You start getting disciplined. You start talking to God. You start having your prayer time. You start worshiping. You start praising. The kingdom of darkness is going to get there before you get to that final encounter. And it's crazy because my whole life, like you said, my whole life, that's what happened. I would get a little bit closer. I would try and understand, but all I knew was religion.
Right.
So it was difficult for me. It was difficult for me because all I knew was religion. I didn't know who God was.
Mm.
I knew who the church was.
Right.
I knew the rules of the church, but I didn't know God. And that was my biggest problem.
Right. So, like what you were saying, how when you want to build a relationship um, with God, there's always something that, like people say, stops them right before, or maybe something in the past. Like for example, you witnessed your father like beat your mom, or like you
Right.
witnessed domestic violence, and a
Right.
lot of people have, and they always bring up the argument whenever I'm talking to someone. Like they always say, hey, like if God is so good, you hear this all the time. God is so good. Why did He let this happen to me in the past?
Right.
Why did He let this happen to me? If He can control everything and see everything, why does He allow this to happen? And what I answer from what I know is God gave us the gift of free will. Like we are free to do whatever we want.
Right.
So by Him controlling us, we're not free people. Like if He does control everything we do, if He did, we wouldn't have that option to be like free. But with that gift of free will, it also allows us. It also allows some people to do bad things and good things. That's not something that He controlled Himself. That's just the gift of humanity, just free will.
Right.
Like I explained that it's not God controlling that happening.
That's absolutely right.
Right.
That's absolutely right. It's not God that's allowing that with that free will that God gives us, like you just said, right? With that free will that God gives us, there's two ways to go. And this is what people need to understand. The free will that God gives us is two ways to go. You either go the way that gets you closer to Him, or you go the way that gets you farther away from Him. Because naturally, we're sinners.
Right.
Naturally, we love to sin. It's in our nature. We love to do it. So there's either two ways you can go. You can go closer to Him or you can go away from Him. So when people go away from Him, what do you think happens?
It's just corruption.
It's just corruption. It's chaos. It's evil.
It's like I've firsthand witnessed what life without God is through my life and viewing somebody else's life. For example, I work previous job, I had a coworker who like throughout the time I was there, I could see his life unfold. As somebody who just didn't believe in God, he rejected the idea, and I could see how everybody's life, almost everybody around me didn't believe in God
Right.
at that workplace. It was like that was just the thing, and I could see how their lives would unfold. Like this guy, he got a promotion, everything was going well for him. He didn't know how to take care of his money. He didn't know how to take care of his money, and then time passed, and he got kicked out of the house. He's living like on his own, everything, and it's just like I see how like I went to church, I follow God, um, and then I see this guy's life, and it's just going horribly. I'm like, hey, I'm praying for you. Like I tell him that I even like at church, I petition like, this guy's a great guy. He's an amazing dude. But I'm praying. I want to pray for him because he just doesn't believe in God. And I feel like he could like benefit from it so much, and just that lack of like believing in God
Yeah.
is just. I feel I can see how much of an impact the absence of God can have on somebody. You can say you're happy, and sure, maybe your life is going great,
Yeah.
but there will always be something inside that's like just needs to be filled with God, and you'll never
Absolutely.
feel truly fulfilled without it.
Absolutely. You're good, man. But look at you, man. Man, listen. There's so many. I could be one of these people that complain because I grew up with a father that never treated
Everybody has a
me.
reason to not believe.
Yeah, everybody has a reason to not believe. You are absolutely. Give me some, man.
Oh yeah, let's
Give me
straight
some of
from
that.
above.
You know what I'm saying?
You won't hear me that
Because
clink anywhere else.
like everybody has a reason. Everybody has their reason, right? Because I could say, yo, my life was unfair. Like my father never loved me. Like how was I supposed to see God as a father if my own father, the father that He gave me, isn't treating me like one? But like you said, there's free will, right? Now, my father never chose to get closer to. Well, he did. Early, later in the book, you find out that he actually did give it a chance. But when you do this, and this is what I want people to understand, when you try God out, you have to go full force. You have to go in commitment mode. Like I commit to this. Like no matter what happens, I want to get closer to the Father. No matter what happens, I want to know who God is. I want to know. I want to know why, what calling I have. I want to know what's the purpose of my life. Like why am I here? Because let me tell you something. Every day you wake up, that means you have purpose. Every day that you wake up, that is proof that you have purpose in life. You have a calling. You have an assignment. God has an assignment for each individual. And the thing is, when you don't fulfill that assignment, somebody's missing out, right? So when it comes to this, I understood I understood something growing up and through my healing. My dad never got close to God. And that wasn't God's fault. You know, my dad treated me unfairly. My dad treated my mom unfairly. My dad humiliated me. My dad did a bunch of stuff that was just like that just, fathers don't do,
Right.
you know, but he never got close to God, and that wasn't God's fault. He chose to do that. So I had to come to like the realization of like, okay, my dad's just not gonna change, you know. And because he's not gonna change, that can't stop me from getting closer to the
Right.
Father and finding out what exactly or who exactly the Father is.
There's a difference between accepting the situation you're in and like coming to terms with it. Because if you, let's say you're in a bad situation, you're just like, okay, I accept it. That's just how it's gonna be forever. Like I can't do anything about it. But coming to terms with it is almost like you understand why this is, but you're not gonna let that situation stop you from growing.
That's
You know
right.
what I mean?
That's exactly right.
And I
Yeah.
feel like for people like people who protest rights that go against our beliefs, they feel like God, was never there for me. I went through these things, and that's why that had no like outcome, that had no influence on the outcome like that is today. What I wish I could say to people is like, it did. You know, you went through this, and like, look at you like right now. You're like, you protesting isn't an easy thing to do. Going out on social media or public isn't something anybody can do. You have that strength that gave you the courage. What you went through gave you the courage and strength to go out in public and speak for what you believe is right.
Yes, sir.
That is not that that came from what you went through. That's not something you just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna just do this. Not anybody has the gift to do that, but you do because you went through what you experienced. Nothing happens for no reason. Whether you figure that out 20 years later in life, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna stand up and do this, or let's say you just at school you tell you to do a presentation about a certain thing, and you choose a topic that impacts people in the classroom that you had no idea they would impact you. Impact them. Everything that you do at one point in your life is product of something that you went through, no matter what stage in life. And it's never too early or late for a life changing moment to occur in your life.
That's right. That's right. That's absolutely right, dude. I'm proud of you, man. I'm proud of you. You're giving. You're talking. You're spitting fire right now, man. Um, that's really good, man. That's really good. Another thing I want to like shed to light is how I grew up. I grew up with domestic violence. I grew up in and you know, and you see this a lot in the I want to call out culture. You know, this podcast, let me tell you something. This podcast, we're calling out everything that goes against, you know, that goes against what the will of God is. We're calling out everything that causes you pain. We're calling everything that tells you that is right when indeed is not right. All right. So like we grew up in this culture, this Hispanic, this Latino culture, right? The Latino culture, there's a lot of machismo. There's a lot of, you know, it's my way or the highway type of stuff, right? Like with my dad, growing up with my dad, I would see that. You know, like my mom would my mom would always tell him like, hey, why are you doing this? Well, if you don't like it, get out. You know, take them kids with you. You know, it was always that pride, you know, that Latino pride, the man pride. But but man, I think we need to I think that's something that I believe that's something that I have to break with my family. You know, I'm totally different with mine. Um and what causes that what causes that is how they were raised,
Right.
you know,
And
and the culture, the Hispanic culture.
and like to what I was saying earlier about everything we go through is for a reason. Like the his Latino culture, everything. This generation went through that. The generation that went through that,
Mm-hmm.
that has to happen so that we're the ones who are going to break it.
Ooh.
We're the ones that are going to break that cycle because that's why we went through
Mm.
it. Because we're mature enough, and now we didn't like that. So what are we going to do about it? We have to break it.
We have to break it. If we don't like it, we have to be the change. We have to break it. See what happens nowadays is that we don't like things. We don't like certain things. And instead of taking action, we spend so much time complaining about it. Would you agree on that?
Yeah.
We spend so much time complaining about it. We spend so much time saying like, "Oh man, I don't like how I'm feeling. I don't like how this is going. I don't like how that." Well, what have you done? You know, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to. I don't like how I'm feeling. I don't like how life is going for me. Like everything is unfair. My mom makes me do this. My dad makes me do that. Like I don't know what's going on. I was like, well, what have you done to change that? What have you done to change that?
And then they just stay silent.
They just stay silent. Crickets. What have you done to feel better? You're struggling with depression. What have you done to feel better?
Tell
Who
your
have you
friend.
talked to?
They just tell their friend, and then
They tell your friends, but look, like, this is what happens. This is what happens. I've taught you guys this in class already, right? I've taught you guys this in class. So we have people that deal with depression. We have people that deal with anxiety. We have people that struggle with mental health, right? And the people that they try and go get help from are the people that are struggling as well. You know, two broken people aren't going to be able to help each other. All they're going to do is dig each other is dig a bigger ditch. You know, they're going to dig a bigger hole, and they're going to struggle to get out of that hole because both of them are broken in the same area, and they're not going to be
You
able
just
to
can't
help
help
each
each
other.
other.
Yeah.
A good
Like
a
what
good friend.
happens sometimes, what happens is you date somebody that's going through this, like, oh, like we relate because we struggle through the same thing. Well, you're struggling through the same thing. How are you guys going to help each other? You can't. So they stay together, and they become very toxic because they stay together for the mere reason that they struggle with the same struggle. And the only reason, I hate to sound like so spiritual here, but like the only reason that the only way to get out of a certain struggle is to get closer to the Father. You know, this is what I mean, that I understand why my dad is the way that he is. It right? Absolutely not. But I understand why he's like that, and it's because of his distance from God. And I had to come to terms with, like, I'm like, okay, there is no sign that this man is ever going to get closer to the Father. So I have to get closer to the Father so I can know what it is to be a father. Like, so instead of complaining and saying, like, oh, because believe me, I spent a lot of my life complaining on how my dad was unfair, how my family was unfair, how my family turned their back on my mom. I spent a lot of time complaining, like, why did God let this happen? Why did that happen? But then when I started writing that book, and healing started happening, and revelations of how I had to come to terms with, like, hey, they never seeked my face. They never seeked my presence. How were they supposed to change?
As you like so many things in your life right now, like this is why I went through this.
Yeah.
This is all, like, if I didn't go through it, none of this would have happened.
None of this would have happened.
Like, people, I hear the term, "Oh, I wish I could go back in time and change this. I wish I could go back in time."
I hate that term too.
Like, you can't. You
You,
don't
the,
understand how lucky you are to have what you have
yeah.
because you went through that.
Listen, I, 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 I've changed my vocabulary a lot when it comes to speaking, like, positivity, like, to my life. Like, I have a blessed life. That's what I say now. Like before, I used to be like, man, I don't even know what I'm doing on this earth. I don't even know what like I, I'm worthless. I don't know but now I'm like, man, I have a blessed life. Like, didn't you go through, like, domestic violence when you were a child? Yeah. What your parents like? Didn't you always pray to God for your parents to get back together? Yes, I did. Absolutely, I did. But I have a blessed life. You know why I have a blessed life? Because without the life that I had growing up, I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't live peacefully and joyfully, and just I have so much peace right now. Like, the peace that I have, the peace that I discovered took me literally 33 years to get, and I'm still learning. I've done ministry, I've done all this, but the peace that I have now is unbelievable, because I'm just like, okay, like, this man never got close to God. Now I understand why he's
And
like
that
that.
was a sign. You saw
Yeah.
what life without God is through your father.
Yeah. I was like, I I don't want any of that. I want to know what it is to be close to God. I want to know what it is to be tight with him. You know, I want to know what it is to be God's friend. And this is why I read every single morning. I read the Bible every single morning. I pray every single morning before I start my day. And I'm just like, I want to know you. I want you to be a part of me. I want you to guide me, because the guidance that I had when I was a child,
It's just,
that ain't it, fam. It ain't it. And a lot of people ask me if I learned stuff from my dad. Absolutely. I learned how to not be a father. You know, that man taught me how to not be a father. That man taught me how to not treat women, and that's a valuable lesson. Because you see, when you start seeing things that way, you become unstoppable, man. Because I could say, oh, he was abusive, he was a liar, like he was a cheater, he had children,
And that's why I'm like this
like
now. Like,
yeah, and that's why I'm all messed up. Like that's that victim mentality. Look, I could sit here and I could be like, oh, my dad was a cheater, my dad was a liar, my dad was abusive, and this is why I'm so messed up. This is why I have depression. This is why I struggle with anxiety. This is why I struggle with my mental health. I can sit there and have that victim mentality.
list of a million things of why your life is going
Exactly.
wrong.
Or I can say, this man taught me how not to be. This man taught me how not to be. He taught me how not to be a husband. You know. So now I'm going to counter. I'm going to counter that. I'm going to do the exact opposite, and I'm going to actually be a good husband. I'm going to be a good father. If you start thinking like that, you are unstoppable. And the only way you can think that way is building a relationship with God.
And then people, well, I see people who don't believe in God, right? They say, okay, God's real, give me a sign. Me personally, I believe that God gives you signs an insane amount of times throughout your life, throughout your day, right? That's just what I believe. Because at a period where I was going through, well, I'm also grateful that I went through something like just like a really dark time in my life, where I'm glad I went through it earlier in that point in my life, like when I was younger, because I feel like I learned so much from that. Even if it was at an early age, there's something people say where they're like, my life's been going so good right now. So
Think I know what you're talking
I know
about.
something's about to go. Something bad about to happen. Like I hear this a lot. My life is going so great right now. I know something bad's about to happen. I feel like you're just manifest. You just want that to happen. Like when my life is going good, my life is going great right now. Like I can happily say that I'm so blessed right now. I'm absolutely like everything is going well, and I'm not thinking, okay, what's gonna happen next? Well, like I'm just like, what am I gonna do to keep pushing this forward? You know, what am I gonna do to keep this positivity in my life? What am I gonna do? What's next? What's like what higher level of this tranquility I have like I can achieve?
Right. And that isn't to say that there isn't any challenges,
Right.
right? Like my life is going awesome too. And that isn't and like I said, that isn't to say there isn't any challenges. But when people you know what gets on my nerves is when people ask me like, how can you say stuff like that? Like you have to be going through something. And I'm just like, I mean, look, listen. I'm not saying that I don't struggle sometimes,
Right.
right? And I know you're not saying that you don't
Yeah. I
struggle
mean, obviously, there's
sometimes.
some days where I'm sad, but
Yeah, there's some days not sad, but like some
yeah,
days where you just don't
you're not
you're not in the
100%.
mood,
Yeah.
bro. Like when I used to preach to you guys every Sunday, there was some Sundays I just wasn't in the mood. Like let's be real, man. Like I wasn't in the mood, and a lot of people right now that I listen to probably be like, "Oh, well, he wasn't filled with the Holy Spirit." Listen, listen, you're too church cultured. All right, you don't understand. Sometimes you just don't feel them in the mood. You're just not in the mood, and but when you understand that and you acknowledge that you're not in the mood, you also come to your senses and say, like, wait a minute, this isn't from God. This isn't from the Father. You know, I gotta get moving. Something needs to happen. You
Nah,
know,
can I say
you
something?
got hot. Yeah, man. I've been waiting for you to say something,
So
bro.
like people who complain about their lives or just like, oh, this happened, that don't let go of the past, they
Yeah.
obviously aren't close to God. And like they need to like following God and like believing in God is their option. They just choose to not do it. Like Chris said, oh, give me a sign. It's not just up to God to just give them a sign that he's real. They have to believe that he's real. And like they go through challenges like, oh, if God is real, why did this happen to me? Why do I go through these challenges? Why is everything going so bad for me? In the Bible, it says that God is in a process, and you just need to trust that process to know how struggle. You need to through struggles to know how like living good. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no,
It makes sense. You good. You good. You good at it. Look,
Yeah.
this is what I like. You guys. All right. So you know me. All right. I've been your pastor for like a while now.
Yeah.
Right. So you know me. You know that I don't play when it comes to this. You know, I tell people I don't beat around the bush. You know, and this is why some people don't like the way that I speak. But I'm not gonna beat around the bush, and I'm not gonna tell you that it's gonna be easy. Following God is not easy. Having a relationship with God is not easy. It takes discipline,
Yeah. And the problem
right?
is
It
people paint it as like, yeah, follow God, your life is perfect.
no,
And that's just
it's like he's the healer and this and that. Like, let me tell you something. I I've experienced years of trauma, right? Those years of my childhood trauma are not going to go away in one day. They're not going to go away in a week. They're not going to go away in a month. I'm 33 years old. There are years of childhood trauma that I have to still heal from, right? And writing my book helped me heal, but I'm not fully healed. This is why I need Jesus in my life every single day, not just once a week, not just on Sundays, not 3 times a week, not just with small groups. I need him personally and intimate every single day, because trauma doesn't years of trauma does not go away in one day. It takes time. You're working through all this time. You're not going to get rid of it quick. It's going to take a lifetime to heal from it. And a lot of people are probably going to get mad at me because they just say, accept Jesus and your life will be different. It will be different,
but you need to put in
but
some
you need to
effort too.
put in some effort. You need to put in some work. You need to put in some discipline. You need to develop discipline. And you won't develop discipline by just sitting back and saying, Jesus got me. You have to say, what are the next steps? What do I need to do? Let me stay in contact with Jesus.
Like, you know that funny story where it's like the guy was in a hurricane and I think he told us this. He was like, he was begging, he kept praying to God. He was like, please save me from this mess. And the guy in the raft pulls up. He's like, hey, get in. We'll save you. And he's like, nah, God got me. And then the guy in a boat comes in and he's like, hey, get in, please. Like, showing people running around. He's like, nah, my Jesus gonna save me. A guy in a helicopter pulls up. He's like, come on, man, we're about to clear everything out. He's like, nah, my God has me. To like a week later, he dies. He's
A
in,
week? He lasted a week?
yeah, he dies, and then he's like, yo, God, why didn't you save me? He was like, I sent you 3 things and you didn't listen. Like, he said you didn't even try to pay.
Exactly. So we get this confusion sometimes as believers, right? Like, we're just like, God's got me. You know, sometimes let's put I've used the dating advice. I've used the dating example way too much. I'll just come up with one right on the spot. Work. All right. Let's use that. Oh, I'm unemployed. You know, I'm unemployed, and God, like, I really need a job, and I believe in you. I trust you. You know, your friend calls you that he's working for Domino's. You know, I don't want to be a pizza driver. I mean, I don't want to be I don't want to work for a pizza place. You know, I don't want to be a delivery driver. I don't want to do that. And then your other friend calls you and says, hey, I got this little gig where I'm walking dogs. I don't want to do that. I came from working at an office. You know, sometimes we ask God to help us, and he sends people, and sometimes I'll say this, he'll send people that aren't from the church. He'll send people that aren't from our community. And because of our pride and our stupidity, he's not part of my community. I can't be a part of that. I'm part of the church. Right?
Yeah.
But God, don't you think that God is so great that he'll use somebody that's not part of your community, somebody that doesn't believe in the same thing that you believe, to help you out and help you move forward? And you just rejected something that God sent you.
That same way is how I got the job I'm at right now. I worked at a restaurant. I was a manager at a restaurant before.
Mm-hmm.
this one lady comes in. I serve her. You know, I was just doing my job. She comes in and then she's like, come here. She gives me her contact. This happened like around a year ago. She gave me her contact information. She was like, I work for a law firm, blah blah blah. Just I like what I see something in you. I like what I see in you. Once you turn 18, or I'll text her, I'll text her, right? A year, like almost a year passes. I completely forgot I had an interaction with her, and she texts me. She's like, "Hey, how's it going?" Blah blah. Like she just gives me like an opportunity to do stuff with her, and slowly I got this job. And I'm saying, if I didn't take that chance, or because that's for me, things like that, I believe that it couldn't be anything else other than God.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that is it just there's it's coincidences aren't just coincidences. For me, for things, good things that happen out of nowhere in my life, or just little things like remembering to lock the door or stuff like that. I'm just like, that was God. That was just God. Like, that's just God looking out for you. That's just God being in your life every day. I see God in my life every day. There's just moments where I'm like, that was God. Like,
It's simple. It doesn't have to be so
it's like a
deep. We
big
get this
miracle.
we get this feeling like, oh, it needs to be deep, like God himself needs to come down here and tell me that I need to go to that job because I can't believe this person that's offering me this job. I'm just like, right, you're broke. You ask God for help. He just sent that person down there to help you. If you don't get up in there and fill that application, like I'm just like, come on, man. Like, you asked for help. He sent people to help you, and you're rejecting. This is what we don't understand. We're not rejecting the person. We're rejecting God. We're rejecting the message that God has given us, because God himself isn't going to come down here and talk. He's going to use people, and he'll use anybody. And we have the audacity to just be like, that's not from God. It's not from God just because you didn't like it. Hey. Or what? Because you didn't like it, it's not from God? Man, please. If you don't like the message that the preacher's giving at your church, but it's hitting you because you're doing something behind the scenes that you're not supposed to be doing, it's not from God because you didn't like it. It's not from God because it offended you. Man, y'all got me fired up. Y'all got me fired up right now.
You know that was me, right? Like, I told you, like, that moment of time, every Sunday, you were talking about something that, like,
And I didn't even know what you was going through, bro.
It's like every Sunday he would say something just relating to like what I was going through. Every Sunday, and it would hit so deep. And after Sunday, it was just back to that same old stuff. And then the one Sunday, I decided I was like, you know what? I've had enough. I've just had enough of everything I was going through. Instead of letting it, you said this. You said, like, in the darkest point in your life, like this darkest storm, when you feel most alone and afraid, that's when God is trying to connect with you the most. And in that point of my life,
That's right.
I had to listen, and I broke that cycle. Cut off everything I needed to cut off. I decided to make a change for myself and realized that that wasn't like what I was going through. It wasn't going to define me. I was not going to let that define me.
Exactly.
And then after I did that, the next Sunday, it was something completely different, something powerful, but it wasn't related to anything that I was going through. It was if God was like, "Yep, finally you listen."
Finally, you listen. It took you this long. Look at
And
the
that's
breakthrough
like
that you're having right now.
people go through this all the time. They just want to keep doing something that they love, enjoy. They do so much. They know it's wrong. Deep down, you can't tell me people don't know that what they're doing is not wrong.
Yeah.
They know it's wrong,
But
they
they
just
love it.
refuse. They refuse to believe that.
It's
That's the
this
cause of the
flesh,
problem.
fam. It's the flesh, fam. This fleshy flesh. This flesh is going to want you to do everything that it wants you to do. But that's where you come in and say, this is wrong.
People defend
And
it with
flesh.
everything.
Yeah, they just they listen. I can't
not
tell you
good.
how many times people have justified so many things that I'm just like, okay, now you just playing now. You justifying sex before marriage. You justifying fornication now. You justifying adultery? You justifying all this stuff? Like, come on, fam. You playing with the game now.
They, like,
You playing with God now. Like like yes, it's wrong for you to have multiple partners. Do you really think you were made to have sex with multiple partners? I was like, you are playing now. You are playing. And let me just let's not just talk about these are people in the church. These are people in the church with leadership positions that are saying things like this, like, "Oh, God will forgive me," but you up there leading people into worship. You up there leading people into worship, and you got everybody, and you got everybody's number. You got everybody's contact because you got a connection with everybody. Now, like,
And I'll say something. Those
go ahead,
opportunities,
go ahead. I was about to go in right now. Go ahead.
those opportunities don't just happen when you start to get older. They can also, God can also send those opportunities when you're young. Like, for example, you grow up in a family where your parents take you to church. Obviously, if you're a little boy or a little girl, you're not really going to understand much. You're
Yeah.
just going to go to church with your parents because they're going. But at least you can,
Ooh,
like,
you're hitting something real good right now.
but you can gain an idea at least. Feel like, oh, this is good for me. Like, I'm just a little boy. This can start being a good thing in my life. Then you just constantly start growing with the idea that God is your father. That God, like, you have to have faith in God.
there's a I feel
So
this.
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. One quick thing. Something that I know I've had this mentality, and I don't know if anybody else has had this mentality, but this like for like my age group or younger, it's this mentality where okay, I can connect with God later in my life. It's fine. I can just keep doing this. I can connect later. I can connect with God later in my life.
Mm-mm.
If that's a mentality that you're having right now,
Hmm.
it's wrong. Like
You won't connect with God. I'll tell you that
if you
much right
keep
now.
telling yourself, I can connect with God later. Like
You keep telling yourself, I won't connect with God. I'll connect with God later. Right now, I'm young. I have to do so many things right now. I'm so young. This is the time where you in church. You know how you serve a lot in church. This is the time to do it. You don't have a family. You don't have a family. You are single. You are, you're in your teenage years. This is the time to serve in church as much as you can, right? Once you have a family, that's when it's time to slow it down in the church and serve your family so you can serve God with a pure heart, so you can serve God in a correct way. But as single people, that is when it's the time to serve in the church. And I'm gonna tell you right now, these church leaders, these pastors that are having all these people, all these young kids, just that are trying to look for families that have families and have them draining serving at church are wrong, fam. Are wrong. You guys right now, this is the time to serve. But once it becomes a time, like when you're in college and stuff like that, and when you're in looking to, marry somebody and stuff like that, once you're married, tone it down because then comes kids. All right, and but you mentioned something. You mentioned something earlier that I wanted to touch on, Mario. Um, growing up in the church, growing up in the church. Um, there are some people like me, right? That I technically, you can say that I grew up in the church, right? Because I've been going to church since I was 11. But I knew church. However, I did know God. Now, I chose to know church and not know God. And let me explain what I mean. This is how you end up knowing church and not knowing anything about God. You go to church, you serve, but you don't read your Bible. You don't understand what you're doing at church. You just know that you go every Sunday. Or in my case, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That's when I would go to church. In my case, right? I was going to church every single day, and I had no ounce of Bible knowledge. I had no interest in reading the Bible. I hate reading. I had no interest in prayer life. I didn't know who I was talking to. I looked. I'll be honest, I felt like I was stupid talking to myself because I didn't know who I was talking to. You know, I knew church, but I didn't know God. So that is very dangerous because you grow up and you become a teenager and you're doing all this serving. Listen, you could end up being the worship leader and you're leading people into what if you don't know who you're worshiping? Huh? Come on now. Like you grow up in church, you have no interest in the Bible, you read no verses, you have no interest in getting in a relationship with God, and you end up being a worship leader, you end up being a preacher. Who are you leading people into worship? I mean, what like where are you leading the people? You know? That becomes dangerous. And we have a lot of that right now. We have a lot of that right now because the church concentrates on growth in numbers. The church concentrate on growing the organization instead of growing in an intimate relationship with Jesus. Oh, y'all better stop playing with me, fam. Oh man, that's a problem. That's a problem. You know, we have kids growing up like, what's my purpose? You know, and like you said before, when you're feeling like you're in the storm, that is when God is trying to communicate with you the most. But how do you know that if you have no relationship with God? How do you know that during the storm, that's when you have to try and get closer to him, even though things are pushing up against you? That's when God is extending his hands the most. You know, what if I told you that when you're depressed, that's when it's time to get closer to God because that's when God is trying to reach out the most. When you're going when you're going through a struggle with your mental health, that is the time, that is the flag that has to go up and says, start praying, start talking to God because he's trying to get to you, but you're not letting him get through to you because all the stuff that you're going through. And now, is it easy? Absolutely not. It's hard. It's hard because you feel like you are totally worthless. Internally, you feel like you are nothing. You don't feel like doing anything. But that is the time where Jesus's hand is extended and it is waiting for you to reach out. I have your breakthrough right here, but you're not reaching out.
You're not even looking for it.
You're not even looking for it.
Not taking your opportunity.
You're not taking the opportunity.
You're just
Now, somebody could say, he's like, how can depression, how could struggle with mental health be my opportunity? You don't know what I'm talking about because you don't know what it is to have a
think about it this
relationship
way.
with God,
You step in mud. What do you try to do? You clean it up. You try to clean it up.
right?
Your life, when you get into depression, that's a muddy situation. But instead of trying to clean it up, you just stay there. You just like accept your fate. You're like, yep, I'm
Accept,
tired.
accept your defeat.
Yep. What do you stand up and do
Accept your
something about
defeat.
it?
I don't want to.
Not accept
I'm
your defeat.
tired. I'm exhausted. I'm drained. You're drained because you're operating in an empty cup. You're drained because you have no other way to go. But you actually do though. There's somebody that's waiting for you to come back. But out of pride, out of distraction, we choose to just accept defeat. How can I go back? How can I go back? I failed already. Best believe he's waiting for you to come back. Best believe he's waiting for you he's waiting for you to come back, and he knows you're gonna fail again. He knows you're gonna slip and fall. He knows how stubborn you are. That's the thing I like about God, that he knows exactly how stubborn you are. He knows exactly the stupid choices you're going to make. He knows how many of them you're going to make. And even still, he's like, I'm going to be right here when you make them. I'm going to be right here waiting for you to get back on track. Come on.
So some people don't understand. He will always, always accept you.
How much time do we have, Johnny?
You're an hour four in.
An hour four in? Wow. Okay.
How much time do you usually?
I mean, we don't really put a time limit to it,
I was thinking like
but this is pretty good.
two. I want to touch two topics. Maybe like another time.
Go ahead, tell
Another
me.
topic would be. Do you remember generational curses?
Yes.
I feel like this generational curse, or our next one is. I feel people don't understand that no matter how young somebody is, they could be going through something. I feel like I see that in this next generation coming up. I
Oh
see,
yeah.
they're going through like these just kids, these literal children are going through so much,
Yeah.
and people are just like he's just a kid, you know. He's only like I feel like that's a generational curse. Like it's just insane how much these kids are going through or claim to be going through the things they have to see, and they handle this completely different than how we handle it. And I feel like that is something that
What's the generation after you?
I have no idea. It's like alpha,
When does Z like top off? Yeah, look that up, and I'll say something about Generation Z.
and then another thing I
Let
was saying,
uh huh.
another topic would be religion. How I see like Muslims, Christians, Catholics, Jewish, like the most people who worship God in their own way. They're so devoted; they devote their life to this belief. And how if you put a Christian and a Muslim in the same room, how like you can see like the worst side of them because they're like, it's my way, not this way. And
Yeah,
I was like,
because religion divides.
yep,
Religion doesn't bring anything together.
that's what I was like. The religion is like it's not something God made.
You got an answer for us?
Yeah, so Gen Z is from 1997 to 2012, and then Generation Alpha is from 2013 and 2025.
Alpha.
2013 to 2025. So Mia, my daughter is Alpha. I haven't really gotten a chance to know Alpha just yet. I've gotten a real good chance to know Z though. Y'all get on my last nerve. But I'll tell you this, right? I'll tell you this. I admire Generation Z for this. You got Generation Z kept me on my toes because Generation Z weren't afraid to question anything. And that's what I feel my generation, the millennials, we were scared to question things. Gen X, scared to question things. You know, Gen X grew up with boomers. Gen X were raised by boomers. Now I feel like they tried to, but I feel like Gen X is like the lost generation. How many Gen Xers do you see at churches? Not much. Millennials, we still kind of have hope. And Gen Z, Gen Z has actually lost hope.
Yeah.
Gen Z
Yeah.
has lost hope.
Like
And Gen Z, because every Gen Z, Gen Zer that I would talk to would question me. Why should I believe that? Why should I believe that Bible says what it says? Why should I believe that God created the heavens and earth? Why should I believe? So it kept me on my toes. I'm like, look, this is why. This is this is why my classes were so, not toot my horn or anything like that, but this is why my classes were so good because I came to you guys with information, man. I was like, hey, look, let me explain it to you this way. Let me give it to you through a different lens, because honestly,
you know, they call it
honestly,
the Gen Z Bible.
huh? Bro, don't even. So I heard that. I thought it was a joke at first.
No, me too.
I thought it was a joke at first, but then it's a real thing. There's
No,
actually a
the
Gen
verses are
Z Bible.
insane.
The
They're
verses
like,
are
they're
insane.
like, what's up, homie? He said,
Like
he
they have
said,
words like mid.
they said no. They said that what's her name? The Virgin Mary was a simp for the angel. So
The Virgin Mary was a simp for the angel.
and
Yeah, yeah. I was like, oh my God, what is going on, bro? Why is this? That's one Bible that I will not be getting. Uh, but there is a Gen Z Bible, and I had no clue there was a Gen Z Bible. That's wild. That's wild. But Gen Z, but listen, Gen Z. The thing about Gen Z is they don't want you to preach to them. They want you to have a conversation with them. Which is the reason why I started this podcast. I feel like we should move out of like the preaching thing, like talking to people. I mean, like talking at people.
talking with
and talking with people because I mean
It's more engaging that way,
it's more engaging, it's more
and it's more like reaction wise because
yeah,
you see how they react to the
yeah,
information you give them, and you
yeah.
can change. You can.
Like you used to tell me that my preachings were really good, but how many of them did you have a chance to reply back and talk to me like you're talking to me right
Like
now?
sometimes you're preaching and you want to add something in,
Yeah,
or you have a question about something, but you can't do the same thing with like in a conversation. You could add in, you can point something out, you can ask a question, you could solve like maybe
exactly.
some a doubt that you had.
Yeah.
With a preach, yes, you're receiving the word. I'm not saying preach is bad. I'm saying the times are changing. We should start changing the way we act too, and I feel like it won't be easy. Definitely not. I feel like it's something that will happen through an amount of time.
Nothing that is labeled as great is ever easy.
Yeah.
And I think that right now, the power of conversation can overpower preaching. Because when you stand there and you talk at people, there's no like, but what about this? But what about that? There's no back and forth, and when you talk about a sermon, there's a time limit. When you talk about a conversation, though,
A
that's that
conversation.
a conversation that's actually like, you know, we can go and have a cup of coffee somewhere and have a 2 hour conversation. Now, a sermon, well, nowadays, how the church is trying to do it now, like we have to be out in and out in an hour. We don't have too much time. So your sermon has to be 15
Putting a
minutes.
schedule on the word of God.
You're putting a schedule on the word of God. And we're talking about, well, the Holy Spirit is, he can do something. He could do it. He could do whatever he can do. He'll do it in 15 minutes. And if he could do it in an hour, he'll do it in an hour, but he could also do it in 15 minutes. I was like, no, that's just you trying to leave church early, bro. Stop playing with me. All right. That's just, stop scheduling God.
And sometimes when they preach, they don't even say everything they need to say. They still have more
Because they
They
still
still
information
they
they
have
have the
want
more
to
to
time
say.
limit.
say. They still have more to say, but now we're worried about a time limit. Now when you have a conversation, you can sit there and you can talk and talk and talk and talk and be like, bro, we've been talking for like five
In a
hours.
conversation, it's more likely for you to remember everything because you're also engaging in that.
Exactly.
So you know what you said. And remember, you said you remember a lot more. If you're just receiving the words, it is harder to like you say you preach to thousands of people, hundreds of people. You cannot guarantee that every single person paid as much attention as the next. But you can guarantee that if you sit down and have a conversation one on one, sure, it'll take longer to spread the word of God. But in the end, it doesn't matter how much time it takes because
Exactly.
you're still doing it one by one. You're changing somebody's life.
Oh, you know what? Thank you, Holy Spirit. Going back to the book, going back to the chapter, we kind of drifted away from the chapter. I
Yeah.
don't know if you noticed that, but it's fine though. It's cool. This is what we do. This is strength from above. Uh, Going back to the chapter though, now that we're talking about conversations, I've never really had a conversation with my dad. It's always been an argument, or it's always been him talking at me. It's never been him trying to have a conversation with me. He would start by saying, "Hey, look, I want to have a conversation with you, and I'm not here to argue." I'm like, bro, this is already like, you're gonna argue with me. Like, you're not gonna let me talk. You're not gonna hear my side. You're just gonna say everything that you want to say and roll out and leave me like crushed. Um, because that's just the way that he was. He'd be like, "This, you're doing this wrong, that wrong, this wrong, this wrong, and you've been helped to do this and then walk away." Having, to my fathers out there, having a conversation with your children is probably the best thing that you can give them. Um, Spending time out of your day to sit down, have a coffee or a bottle of water with your children, and just be like, hey, look, let's talk. Let me hear you out and hear me out. And let's get to the bottom of whatever the issue is.
And from the
It's
point of view of like the son,
Yeah.
My dad did do this. He would take the time of day. We're saying like to not get discouraged because yo, I could not care less about what like he would have to say when I was like younger. Yo, I hated those conversations. But I can't say as much as I hated them, there was always something I learned, or like there was always like it always just the thought, just the thought that he cared. Over time, I realized he could be yelling at me, he could be like throwing these, but he
Yes.
took the time to have
Yes.
a conversation with me, and
Yes.
just want you guys to understand, like, it doesn't
Yes.
matter how much like your son or like whoever you're talking to looks like they hate it. They don't want to be there because trust me, I did not want to be there. I hated it, but I still received something. So like I would still receive something. I would still receive information, and I would at the end you can't stay mad forever. You have to listen. You have to learn how to listen. Now, like me and my dad have conversations. I tell him, I'm like, thank you, like thank you for doing that. I know, I know. Like I looked like it was like the worst thing for like I just did not want to be there. It stressed me out, but it did something. Just that like now I can appreciate that he took the time out of his day to sit down and listen to this kid who didn't want to be there, clearly mad, but he's that effort just showed how much he loved me, like how much he loved me, and all that time and effort is just
Exactly.
it's meaningful.
Exactly. And you know what? I'll say this. I'll be bold enough to say this. Every conversation that my dad tried to have, I believe I believe it came out of love. I believe that he tried, but he did it the only way that he knew how. You know, he would have conversations with me that will put me down, but thank God that I tried to reach out to my heavenly Father. Like I tried to like be like, okay, like I don't feel like this is what I need to do. You know, he gave me this advice, but I don't feel like this is what I need to do. What if I did something different? And thank God that every piece of advice I would take from my dad, and some of it I would reject. Now, here's what I want to say to people. Sometimes you ask God to help you in ways that you have no idea how you'll get through, right? Now, God sends people to your life. When you hear an advice that touches the subject of what you're struggling with, listen, analyze it, dissect it, and take the good and reject the bad. You'll know which part is good and which part is bad. You know, some of my overthinkers right now are probably like, "Oh, how do we know?" You will know. You will know. You will know. Um, this is what helped me. This is what helps a lot of people. Just realize that when you ask God for advice, He sends people. What is that noise? You guys hear that?
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah. Whoa. Anyways, yeah. Anyways, sorry, I got distracted. He sends people to your life. Do not turn your back on these people. Listen to what they got to say. Sit there and listen, man. Because sometimes the things that you don't like to hear
is what you need to
is what you need to hear. And you need to have the discipline. You know, I used to have somebody, I used to be like, look, I'm telling you the truth. And they used to tell me, well, it doesn't help every time you remind me of how much of a screw up I am. I'm like,
You're taking it the wrong way.
you I'm not trying to tell you that you're a screw up. I'm trying to I'm trying to go back and remind you of the choices that you made. Right now, what you're dealing with is the consequence of the choices that you made. So what I'm trying to tell you is I'm watching you head toward the same direction that you headed back then. So I don't want you to do it again. But it doesn't help me that you remind me every single time. So as a mentor, I was like, okay, I don't know what to do anymore. So what I'm trying to tell the mentees is listen, listen, listen. Again, I'll give it to you this way. Do you really think that just because you don't like what you're hearing, and what you're hearing is causing like a deep cut in you, do you really think that just because of that, it didn't come from God? Think about it. Think about it, fam. Sometimes what cuts us the most is what we need to hear for us to make a change. Because if we don't hear it, and if we don't understand that it's cutting us, and that it's like, you know, something that's hurting us
It
while it's
hurts
being,
because it needs to
yeah,
be healed.
it hurts because it needs to be done, right? There needs to be a change. And God is reminding you because you won't remind yourself. You will never remind yourself.
Mhm.
And this is why God is bringing a message to you saying, hey, this needs to change. As much as it hurts, understand that it's being told, it's being given to you because it needs to be done. Now, this is the Strength from Above podcast. We're going to cut this off right here, right now. And we will catch you guys on the next one.